It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all here. I must just give a disclaimer to say that I am still on cloud nine after celebrating my birthday last Friday. My birthday was actually on Saturday, but I had a comedy show for almost 200 of my closest friends last Friday. It's something that I've wanted to do for a really long time, and I think it was successful. So I am still reeling with excitement from that. In fact, I wish I could kind of bottle that up and keep it. But this morning, I woke up thinking about true crime shows. I love true crime shows, hearing about, how detectives can kind of figure out what has happened to be able to solve situations, to find out like what's going on in the minds of people who have um, committed violent crimes against people they don't know, against people that they know and love dearly. And it is insight actually into just how the world works, because I know for sure that I used to often say things like, can't we all just agree that X? And I remember the first time that I started to question, can we all just agree? I had learned that LGBTQ children are 33% more likely to die by suicide in K through 12 education throughout this country. And I think that was public school numbers. There's 15,000 public schools in our nation. And I remember saying, can't we all just agree that we want children to live? And shortly after that, I, upon reflection, was able to see that there were people who would put their children out onto the street as soon as they learned that they were members of the LGBTQ community, that their sexual orientation was other than heterosexual. Um, and we know that putting our children out onto the street without any money, without any food, without um, agency, because they're not even adults, is dangerous. And so it was one of the first times that I realized, oh, this thing I think, where we would rather for people to be alive than to be heterosexual, that maybe not everybody thought the same thing. When you consider the kinds of jokes that we tell about people who have gone to prison or jail and who have been sexually assaulted by members of the same sex, and then we somehow think that that's part of the punishment, it was an indication for me that no, there are some things that we all just cannot agree upon. And that was when I created created the framework for the book, Cultivating Culture as a Garden. I started thinking about what are the good and beautiful and reasonable things that I want to grow, that I want other people to grow. Um, and what are the things that I think should be beaten back like weeds? And so I use this analogy that if I'm trying to grow tomatoes, I am not going to plant some invasive species like dandelions in my tomato garden. Now, every analogy will fall down on you. They don't all work flawlessly. But in general, you get the idea. If I'm trying to grow tomatoes, if I'm trying to grow peppers, I am not planting dandelions in that garden. There's always the person who's like, well, dandelion greens are good for us, and dandelion greens, are not weeds. Yeah, yeah. And throughout the globe, we have weed killer because we want to beat back dandelions. And when I think about dandelions, it makes me, or it causes me to think about what it looks like when we're talking about things like First Amendment rights. And we're like, well, people can say whatever they want, and we want to hear what people want to say. And I, in theory, agree that people have a right to say whatever they want to say. And those of us who have access to microphones, whatever media that is, whether that's your podcast, whether that's the news, whether that's what's on billboards, we have a responsibility. This is what I know, to make sure that if we're trying to grow tomatoes, that we're not putting weeds in the garden, which brings me to my love of true crime videos and movies. I notice now when I go back and watch things like Law and Order, which isn't really true crime, that's fiction, that there are times when people are violating folks' constitutional rights, going into homes that they weren't supposed to be in, fabricating information so that they can get warrants, roughing somebody up, pushing them up against the car so they could get information. And recently, one of my cousins came to me to let me know that here in my lovely town, that there are people who are guilty of crimes. Now, listen, they're guilty of crimes. They have committed the crimes that they are accused of. However, their constitutional rights about search and seizure were violated in order to convict them. And, my initial reaction was, I ain't got time to worry about that. If you did something and you're in jail, I'm not saying that your constitutional rights should be violated, but I'm saying I don't have time to work on that. And, it bugged me all night after I said that to him. Because if someone will violate a person's constitutional rights when they're guilty, what makes you think they won't violate your constitutional rights when you're not guilty? And when I take a look at what's happening right now, there are so many things that are illegal or unethical that are happening. And we've become slightly numb to them. And here's what I know. It's because of our ability to be manipulated by media. Stay with me here. When I watch Law and Order and I get to know Stabler, when I get to know the characters, they make them, they tell me about their families. I get to see about how scared they are. I get to see all about the conversations that they have. I get to see them as real people, not as monsters. And when I get to see them as real people, not as monsters, I am more likely to be on their side when they are violating the constitutional rights of someone, even when guilty. But see, when someone is guilty, you have to follow the law in pulling together your information in order to convict them. You can't violate the law so that you can convict somebody you know is guilty. And it's fascinating because it is empathy that is being used to cause us to violate rights. Because here's what people know about us. Here's what folks know about us. If they can get us to think of someone as a monster, then they know we will allow almost anything to happen to someone who has been deemed a monster. This week I understand that we are upset with Pete Buttigieg because Pete Buttigieg said that when we're thinking about sports, we need to evaluate. It is not black and white as it relates to trans women specifically playing sports. Now, I don't know what percentage of trans women are playing sports, but I would venture to say that if trans people are only 1% of the population, you split that by half, assuming that trans men and trans women are equal. Now we're down to 0.5%. And then of that 0.5%, which trans women want to play sports? We talking about hardly anybody. And I'm not saying that issues don't matter because they impact just a few people, but I'm saying, how is it that the central topic that we're talking about when we are evaluating our politicians is something that impacts like the fringes of society, right? But Pete Buttigieg says that there's some nuance there. Now, a logical, reasonable, critical questioning person would say, yes, there is some nuance there, because we're not just talking about gender. We're not just talking about sex. We're also talking about physical ability, how much hormone treatment you have or have not taken. But here's what's fascinating. When you are on the side of good and right and acceptable and dignity for all, any little thing will cause you to kick people off the bridge. But when you are on the side of let's bring people together to be dandelions, to be on the side of hatefulness, to be on the side of wrong, to be on the side of what most people would deem to be not morally acceptable and right, that bridge is really wide. And so when I consider the fact that someone says something that is logical and reasonable and critical and questioning and tough, that we're like, kick him out of here. I wonder how much time we are spending in our therapy offices really interrogating our need for perfection, our hypervigilance that any little character flaw, even if logical, reasonable, critical, and questioning, is kick you off the island. Because I recently posted something on Substack, and I think I said God in my post. Well, I happen to be Christian. God is a central component of my life. This person was going in on me because they were atheists. Now, I got a wide bridge, right? I got a wide bridge. Inclusion means that as we are including all types of religions, all types of faith traditions, I'm allowing you to believe whatever you want to believe. You're allowing me to believe whatever I want to believe or not. How is it that now you mad because I mentioned God? And so what she said back to me was, God is the reason for Project 2025 and the right-wing Christian nationalism. Y'all, we got some incredible work to do because these people have done a number on us. When we start to equate fringe thinking with the central theme of a religion, it's the same as like suggesting that Muslims are Hamas. What are we even talking about here? And when we can't come together on specific values that we say we aspire to, we're going to keep losing because we keep expecting perfection. We're never going to get perfection. When you don't get perfection, then you're like, see, you should have done it. And I'm not even talking about everybody else. I remember when I can't even remember the dude's name, but he had been the mayor of New York, and then he was running for president, and he was one of the critical people who was responsible for stop and frisk. And now that I have a level of awareness around how stop and frisk is a violation of people's constitutional rights, why are you stopping me when I'm on my way to work, when I'm on my way to take my kid to childcare, so that you can frisk me? And if you make me late multiple times, now I'm going to lose my job. The impact of this specifically has racial background to it. We know the kinds of people who are getting stopped and frisked. It is not all citizens getting stopped and frisked. It is certain people who look a certain way, regardless of what they're wearing. And so now I got a decent sensitivity to stop and frisk. And I'm like, nah, if that's the candidate y'all choose, I'm not going to vote for him. So even I was just like, my issue is where I draw the line is that this violation of people's constitutional rights. But here's what I know and what I be trying to tell everybody else. Voting is like getting on a bus that gets you close to your destination. And sometimes you got to get off and walk a couple of blocks because it didn't get you right to the doorstep. You are very rarely going to be able to vote for a candidate who's going to pick you up at your doorstep and take you exactly to where you want to go. And you don't have to, and they are like not aligned exactly. No one is going to be aligned to you exactly when we are voting. That just is not going to happen. And Bloomberg, I think I was like, if that's who y'all pick, I am not picking that person. I wasn't willing to go with President Donald John Trump because, again, there are character flaws and then there's flawed character. I maintain when you just look at the person, I ain't saying the man is a monster, but I am saying that he has been found culpable of sexual assault. He has been found culpable of racial discrimination. He is not found culpable. This man pulled out a full page ad against some teenagers who were absolutely innocent. And then when they were proven to be innocent, what did he do? Double down on it. Like when you look at the history of actions for this person, I'm not saying he's monstrous. I'm just saying he's not a perfect leader for us. And so almost anybody else would have been better. But what folks know is that we do not take care of our own stuff. And so we start looking for perfection in others when we don't even have perfection in ourselves. And then we do this false equivalent. And he just as bad as this. Is he though? You got a person who has like one character flaw, and then you got a person who has 287 character flaws, and you go, same. How is that? And so when I think about my contribution to this thing, when I consider my values of humor, competence, justice, those are my values. When I'm watching fictional crime shows and I'm rooting for Detective Stabler, who is roughing people up, going into people's houses, into people's cars, and they ain't supposed to, Ice-T punching somebody he ain't supposed to punch. What is that doing to me over time when I'm supposed to be a person who's about justice, but I'm also willing to watch and support violating people's constitutional rights? How is that possible? That is made possible by empathy. When someone understands what you think, feel, and believe, they can use that information to get you to do what they want. And so I am arguing, Sugar, that we spend our time doing our own internal work, more and more of it actually, so that when it is time for us to evaluate others, that our lenses are clearer, that we are, this unrelated, but I'm gonna just say, I saw somebody I love and respect say, I'm not doing business with somebody who has had an affair with their partner or spouse. Well, I want you to go back through history. You wouldn't have done business with JFK. You wouldn't have done business with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There's so many. You wouldn't have done business with King David, who God said was a man after his own heart. It's this rigidity, right? But then if it means a couple of more coins in my pocket, then I'm willing to overlook all kinds of issues. In fact, President Donald John Trump cheated on every single wife he had with the new one he got. Is that my thing to judge? No. But how do you vote for that, but then say you're not going to do business with someone who has cheated on their spouse? The misalignment is very stressful, actually. And so when I am advocating for empathy, what I'm advocating for is not niceness, although I love niceness. It's not kindness, although I love kindness. What I'm advocating for is for us to understand. Think about a detective in a true crime story who is using all the tools afforded to them within the bounds. They don't have to be lawless, within the bounds of the law, doing what's right. When they understand what somebody else thinks, feels, and believes, that's how they get what they want. It is solving a crime. It is understanding that the difference between manipulation and inspiration is nothing but really intent. When I'm talking to you on Friday, I am trying to convey an idea. I'm trying to get you to think something different so that you will do something different. If I had a nefarious intention, I believe that'd be called manipulation. And so there are these things that we say and we adopt, and I'm just not so sure that they are going to be beneficial to us. And I wonder, how is it that we can get on a bus to find candidates who can get us closer to our destination? I maintain that that's why many people don't run. I know when I get invited to be a politician, the primary reason is that I'm not trying to be the person that you digging up everything about me to find out at 16 I cheated on my boyfriend, or that one time I cheated on a physics test, or that, one time I had water at the bottom of my basket at the grocery store, and I didn't see it till I got to the car, and I didn't go back in. These are the hypothetical situations mostly, but I know people who are judging other people based on who their family is. Like I get to choose who my cousin is, right? And so you've got people who would be exceptional politicians who refuse to jump into the races because of the way that we tear people apart and use the media to decide who's monstrous and who's not. I don't know why, but I've been into this Megan Thee Stallion, Klay Thompson little relationship, which I don't know why I care about this, but I'm so happy for her, happy for him. Do I know these people? I don't. Should I care about this? I shouldn't. If something should happen and they break up, is it my business who is at fault, who isn't at fault, and da-da-da? No. The internet is not a real place. We have got to get super, super clear on our values. We've got to dig into empathy, mental empathy so deep that we understand what other people think, feel, and believe. I was trying to explain to someone this week that in order to identify why this group of people were not working together, that you have to know who the individual players are and what they want. We were together for an hour. Over and over and over again, she kept saying, well, I believe this, and I think this, and this is how it looks to me, and I just don't understand. Whenever you are saying words like that, I don't understand, and I think, that is the opposite of empathy. It's the opposite. Because I don't have to agree with you. I remember when I first met David Bell, criminal defense attorney. And I was like, how do you defend somebody who you know is a child molester? Or how do you defend someone who you know who is a serial killer? And he's like, Nicole, I don't agree with what they did. My job is to get them a fair trial, a fair sentence, a fair hearing. Because we call those people monstrous. The moment we make it possible for them to be abused, and if we'll do it to them, then when does it come back on us? And I just need us to be really careful as we are thinking about what it looks like to lead, what it looks like to organize, what it looks like to come together around almost anything. Hatefulness is winning because we refuse to step into empathy and do what we know will be most helpful. And while we're talking about bringing shame back, some of these people don't have no shame. As they are encouraging people, stoking the flames of all the things we know work: sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, just poking at those things because they know they work to distract, divide, destroy us. And the most beautiful thing right now is that I have learned from when I was 10 years old and my dad died on my 10th birthday is that two things can live together at the same time. You can have incredible grief in one hand and joy at the same. And I am still on my high from my birthday last week and still determined more than ever to help us lean into the skill, talent, and ability we have to do the thing we know we are supposed to do in order to move this needle forward and swing this pendulum back towards something that is real and acceptable and whole. I have a leadership coaching clinic next Friday. I have, I think, 10 more seats open. I would love for you all to sign up if you want to know how to use a strategy that will work to help others, but then also help yourself get super, super clear on what's the way forward for yourself, what's the way forward for your family, what's the way forward for your community. There are too many of us who are moving without strategy. And meanwhile, That Project 2025 document was 40 years in the making. Plenty strategy. And here we are. Last week I was listening to a story of a woman talking about her experience all day being in immigration court. This has never been about immigration and people doing it the right way. Because if it were, you wouldn't be picking people up at court. You wouldn't be picking people up at work, at baseball games. It's not what it's about. It's about stoking the flames of racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, and all the isms. All the isms. Somebody I love went to Target this week. I was really tempted to be like, what? Somebody bought a dog from a breeder instead of from a rescue. We'd be tempted to be like, what? I was even told that someone did not come to my a birthday party, not someone I invited, somebody who was a +1 because they had some racist ideas. And I want to be like, what? But listen, if there's one thing I've learned is that you are not going to find somebody whose values overlap with yours like this. There's just not, you're not going to have anybody that's like, the values are like this. What we hope is that it's something like, you know, I don't know, maybe I could get something like this, you know, or maybe, you know, something like this. But the people whose values are over here and mine are over here, it feels like they're winning right now. It does. It feels like they're winning right now. And part of it is because sometimes I'm being too much of a purist. And if you've got one thing I disagree with you about, I'm like, off the island. I struggle when I have to be around preachers who are like, God said women can't be preachers. But if that's the one thing we disagree about, I don't know. Can we come together on the rest of it? I'm on this because I don't feel this way. But I can tell you that when I start to pay attention, when I've got my empathy lens on, looking around at how we've been conditioned to support things, even when they are woefully wrong, because we have created monsters. When the monsters are the ones who are making 200 or worth 200, almost $300 billion, the top 10 wealthiest folks in America having over $1 trillion, but letting food sit on a truck and rot instead of feed it to people. And when I think about, can't we all just agree that we have enough food for everyone to eat? We know that. We got enough food for people to eat. We don't have enough for everyone's greed. We don't have enough for everyone's evilness. Of course, you don't have enough food if someone is saying, let's throw it away. But I know that if you are listening to this and if you have listened this long, it is because you know that you have incredible work to do in this world and something about it just ain't quite working. And you believe that not empathy is the linchpin, but empathy is a beautiful foundation for us to understand what other people think, feel, and believe so we can get them to do what we want. Let people call it manipulation if they want. I call it inspiration. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We've got plenty work to do.